Hello and happy spring. Um,
Hello.
if you want to unmute yourself, please do um, to say hello or chat. Before our presentation, which is going to be by Robin Greenfield and starting at 7 p.m. tonight, so in about 30 minutes, I am going to be doing the Little iNaturalist bit with Brennan. This is a participatory thing. So again, unmute or put stuff in the chat that you want to see. I will start sharing my screen, and Brennan will keep letting people into the room, and we can look at this project. So right off the bat, we can see that we are up to 49 members of this year's project. That is great. And in comparison to all our WMS projects in the past, we're just up to a little start. That's 500 though, 596, almost 600 specimens seen so far, and we haven't really even gotten into proper fungi season in Wisconsin. Compared to last year's project, we, by the end of the year, have gotten up to 8,201.
Yeah, I know that.
So this right as of now, every single time we're gonna look at like who is winning on the leaderboard, and of course there's a lot more to life than winning on the leaderboard of the iNaturalist projects for Wisconsin Mycological Society, but it is still part of life. So right now we have Matt227, who is Matt Welter, on the top of both most posts identified to species and most posted observations in general right now in our project. So he's very active. I've noticed Matt, if you're here, feel free to unmute and accept your award.
No, I don't think we can see your iNet screen anymore.
Really?
Never mind. Maybe
okay.
I see it now.
Maybe I'm a delay. Sorry to everybody. Yeah, I was just going to say, Matt, I would say does a lot of observing things, very small things in the winter, and that is how you get to this position, even when it's still cold. But we are starting to see big fleshy fungi popping up, so we will get to that. But the other people at the top of the leaderboard are Steely Jeff, otherwise known as Jeff Steele, with a lot of different fungi observations, and Brennan, myself, Jeremy Holmstead, and a new person to the project, D.H. Rogers. In terms of most species, we have kind of the same lineup except for Jen Stevenson, or Flath2O is on that board. So I was going to also highlight what people are seeing as well. So we have our most observed species. This will change throughout the year. Right now, it's like most people are seeing kind of crustier things, because if I'm commune or common splitgill, Tremeti pubescens, Exidia species like the jelly rolls, some cool lichens. Graftus scripta is actually one of my favorite common lichens to see, because it fits so well with the name, and it really shows, I guess, a different format for lichens to be in. Common script lichen, it looks like people have scribbled on your tree. But besides this, let's take a look at some recent observations. So we have things that people aren't yet identifying, but I'm going to go ahead and say, Brennan, I think that might be the start of Ceropora squamosus of a pheasant.
I just take pictures of things and I go put the IDs on sometime later. So that was just a couple hours ago.
Okay, fair enough.
So we can ID it.
Yeah, we can ID it. We can also show kind of how that process works. So Brennan has put this up. He knows what it is, but he put it up as fungi. That's a really good way to upload things. I oftentimes upload a bunch of things that I probably know what they are, but I put them up as fungi because I would rather go back through and kind of more deliberatively look at things and puzzle some stuff out and put it on. Although in this case, you're just kind of like more quickly getting stuff up. But if you put it up as fungi, automatically it'll go into our projects, and also anybody looking to identify fungi will have it come up for them, as opposed to just uploading it as an unknown. So if we even just click into the suggesting an identification, the recommendations pop up. It's not that confident in them, but what do you know? I do think that its top suggestion is correct. It's the baby like snout, or like because we kind of compare them to pig snouts of a dryad saddle or pheasant back coming up. So if you want to opening view, and I oftentimes open it in a new tab, which is why I end up with so many tabs, could be a quick way to like go see if you feel confident in an ID. In this case, we can look at, I've limited my geographical range to Wisconsin, and you can always do that by filtering by place. So you click this filter by place and name something like Wisconsin. And that can be useful to actually getting good seasonality data. In this case, we can see that the big spike in Ceroporus squamosus or pheasant-back dryad saddle being seen in Wisconsin is actually right in May. I've heard people call it the Morel Hunter's Consolation Prize. Some, such as Tavis, who doesn't like it at all, would say it's not a prize. But I really, really like this mushroom for foraging, just not when it's big like this, when it's smaller. And as we can see, the season actually extends into the fall and kind of has a second smaller peak. I have heard that didn't used to happen, but right now I would say that's anecdotal. If anybody wants to speak to it, please feel free. And by used to happen, I mean in Wisconsin, that this may be sort of a novel thing, that a new thing that this species is kind of developing an interest in fruiting in the fall as well. And kind of through the year, I have them fruit any day throughout kind of spring to late fall in my backyard. But in any case, going back, one of the next things to do is to kind of rule out whatever the next common things are. None of these are even close, though, so I feel like we don't need to. Let's just put this on it. We could tell Brennan why, and we could say it's a little one. Clarification remarks. All right, so going back to projects, I also wanted to highlight these two. So we have Urnula craterium, or the Devil's Urn, and Gyromitra brunea, one of the so-called false morels, but we could just call them true Gyromitras or Gyromitras. Going to start with the Devil's Urn. So this is a very cool, sort of ephemeral, as far as I know, an ephemeral spring. And I'm going to, my instinct is to very quickly just confirm this, because I agree that's what that is. We can see it still needs ID. It's what Kevin has put on it. But let's open this. We could, and just kind of first explore this one and then look at similar species just to rule out and make sure there's no like really strong lookalikes that I need to be worried about. So you can see that I'm right, that it's a very ephemeral kind of spring ephemeral mushroom for Wisconsin. If we take off the Wisconsin limit, it's still kind of, it's still a spring ephemeral. Now this data is definitely going to be weighted to where our naturalist observers are in general. And we can see, and it's also going to be weighted to just where the mushroom occurs, which is a good thing, but we can see that pretty much people identify the Devil's Urn in like basically east of the Mississippi, North America, and Europe, with some kind of in Japan as well over there, and a little others in Asia. Whether or not those are the same or not, I guess would be a question. The ones outside of like where it clearly is commonly established. But we can also look at the very, very helpful similar species tab that gives us an idea of what we might confuse it for. And I can then filter actually by Wisconsin and it will show me what people in Wisconsin have mistaken it for. Now that does limit the amount of like observations by quite a lot if we're just narrowing it down to Wisconsin. So that is a concern. Sometimes this is useful, sometimes it isn't. Actually, I can see why people would mistake this. Ebony cup, pretty similar. So this is actually close enough that I might, even though I still think it's Ornula, I might still sit and be like, what is, how do people tell the difference between this species and...
I don't think that one has a stipe. I think it kind of tapers towards the base, but it doesn't have the same like elongated base.
Well, that's a good point, Lauren. It's just a literal cup, whereas if we go look at the Ornula, yeah, you end up with this, I suppose we would call it a stipe. Yeah, and even when it's more broad at the base, it's still kind of forming it. Let's look at our original observation. So in this case, Kevin, I think, has kind of a very top-down shot, and there's no second picture, which I've done it before too. We are not shaming Forager Kevin for doing this. We've all done it, but it does limit our ability to confirm it, but I do still think that we can see tapering.
And it looks like that observation kind of has like a pattern. I haven't seen this species, but I've seen the other one, and this one looks like it has more of a like freckled pattern there, like scaly.
Yeah, kind of. I don't know if they would apply the term, but you know, like how Cereopora squamosus, the pheasant back, they call them squamules.
Yeah, looking pretty squammy.
Squammy. You sure are. Okay, so for now, as soon as I manage to get out of the photo, I am going to agree with this, but I will link to this other one. I a lot of times do this just kind of for my own memory and maybe to help whoever, like I compared this texture and looking like your observation tapers is what to Ornula. This is a very fun, all of these kind of cup fungi, especially like the devil's urn and all those sorts of things, are definitely really fun to find and look at in the spring. You can pick a wildflower and float it in the rainwater that's collected in there. Not really edible. They're like rubber, but you can set them up to look like little cauldrons, and I think that's worth quite a lot. So we are at about 15 minutes till we're going to have Brennan introduce Robin Greenfield, our speaker. Just a reminder that this is not the speaker part. This is just iNaturalist. If anyone wants more information about the WMS projects on iNaturalist, please feel free to email us. I was also going to look at this other cup fungi. So this is Jeremy Hooper's observation, and boy, did you observe this elf cup with a lot of different views, and that's very, very useful.
I was just so excited to find it. I just kept snapping.
Like the paparazzi in the woods. I like this one, this photo especially. Yeah, it is very fun to start seeing them. I haven't found one yet. So right now it's identified to genus. So you found it in Milwaukee too, which is fun.
It's a spot where I find it every year at this time. So it's one of my first signs of mushroom hunting spring.
That's great. It's your gopher, or is it a gopher?
Groundhog?
Groundhog. Thank you.
Okay.
It's your groundhog in the Cudahy Nature Preserve. Ah, and there's a previous year. You aren't kidding.
Oh, is it too loud?
So this is kind of the inauguration of the mushroom season right here with Jeremy's Elf Cup in Cudahy Park. So looking at, I don't know a ton about the, let's see what the taxonomy of this is. So I guess we would probably be trying to tell the difference between the species and the species. And then
I had read the difference between the Austriaca and the Coccinea. You need a microscope to see if the little hairs are curly.
Okay.
Which is why I kept it to genus and not to species.
That's a really, that's what we would call exemplary data keeping behavior on iNaturalist.
I just collected one and was also reading the same thing and trying to differentiate. It seems so Coccinea is not in this area apparently, though. And then Occidentalis is the long-siped one, so it's Dudleyi and Austriaca seem to be the two that look really pretty much the same macroscopically here.
What was the
And
first one you said?
Dudleyi. And I'm not exactly sure what the recorded range of that one is. Austriaca, people say it's common in Minnesota, so I assume throughout this area, the state as well, it would be. But I'm new here, so I'm learning. But yeah, it's trying to tell if the hairs were curled. I did scope mine. Our internet's being slow, so are my observations not. Does it upload? Oh, it did upload apparently. But if you were looking at the spores, and it wasn't entirely clear which one it was, but yeah, those seem to be the two species.
So there was also the hairs. So the hairs was one feature, and then there's a little bit of difference in the spore morphology. The spores of Dudleyi are nice and rounded at the ends, and Austriaca has truncated ends of the spores.
Like more blunt.
Hmm.
And one of them has like a gel, like a sheath.
And who was Jeremy? You found this cup. If it makes you feel better, sometimes you can scope something and still be confused.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I don't have a scope, so.
Let's see. I bet these are yours.
Oh yeah.
There they are.
And they had those really like separated polar droplets. Which
Yeah.
Looking at it, that made it seem more like Dudleyi based on like the information, and then also looking at some other observations with microscopy too. But yeah, still some ambiguity about the hairs and the shape of the spores.
Are these what we would be calling the hairs? Or am I?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if it was like spaghettied up hyphy, or but at that point, the last one you had, you can kind of see it coming off the edge of
The edge, yeah. I
Okay.
struggle with that too. Anything but spores, like trying to be like, well, not just spores, but you know, with a new thing that you've not scoped before, trying to understand if you're actually seeing what you think you're looking for or not. Because there's so many things, including artifacts. I once went down a complete rabbit hole because there was pine pollen on my lichen sample.
Oh wow.
And I learned what pine pollen looks like under the microscope. Eventually, once I figured out that's what it was.
That's great. And with that, it like they look curly, but then I found an observation from Slovakia that had way like triple as curled hairs for Austriaca. So I was like, well, mine don't look nearly as curled, but they also don't look as straight as some of the micrographs from Dudleyi. So it was like a weird middle ground.
You know, if at some point we were to decide like on an observation that lacks microscopy, so yours has it, so it feels like yours isn't a candidate for this, but for Jeremy's, because we would say definitively our understanding is you can't get better than genus, I can I think agree. Oh, I've messed it up. there's a way to agree but suggest that you can't get better, and it's very useful for kind of making things research grade without having to get to species. Let me.
Yeah, I'd say for anyone uploading Sarcocyphus, since it's out right now, like keeping, if it's not obviously stipitate with like a long base, to keep it, if you see those like white kind of matted hairs and it's relatively flat, just putting it to genus, unless you're scoping. And even then, maybe keeping it if you're not super clear. Because there's people who will just come on and put a species that they think is like regionally appropriate without realizing that you can't do that without looking further. And so definitely props for keeping it at the generic level.
Yeah, and this is the one Lauren's talking about that is very distinct in this genus that has a stalk.
No.
So, which of course, everything on iNaturalist is always able to be improved. Like people can withdraw their IDs. So a curator can come in and fix whole batches of things in one go, and that does happen. But it's still cool for us to all do our part. So I did finally figure out. I forgot how this works, but one way to go is that if people are naming it at the genus level, you go right down here to this quality grade assessment stuff, and say, no, it's as good as it can be. We're happy with it at genus level. It's heralding spring, and we know it's a Sarcocypha, and yep, that's what we've got. And then if Jeremy came and added microscopy, we could change it back. So, but going back to this, first of all, I'm going to save this observation so I can find the microscopy again. Yeah, that's a puzzler. I don't know. Gutioles. So yeah, gutioles is going to be the term for these little droplets in the spores. You can use that in Scrabble. So we've got, I'm going to say in a few minutes, I'm going to have Brennan take it away and introduce our speaker, Robin Greenfield. And for now, I'd just like to cover one last, I lied, two last things. So first up actually is this observation by Brennan. So just want to celebrate this kind of, I don't know, mycological first, maybe. We don't have anyone contesting that, so we'll say that. But Brennan has collected and cultured this. By cultured, I don't know if that's the correct term. He kept it, like, I think we coined the term mycu for mycological zoo in a previous talk here. And he's done it. He's collected the specimen and then put it in like a little chamber and kept it, and it's fruited. Stayed alive and fruited again, or made its mushrooms. So that's exciting because he didn't get a microscopy on it previously, but now is able to. And I can show the original wild. Wow, you're having a conversation here. Okay, one before. So this is like, funnily enough, people would look at this, people who quickly assess whether something's an ascomycete or a basidiomycete would say probably an ascomycete, but no, this is a basidiomycete. It's just cup-shaped. So yeah, from culture grown on miscellaneous herbaceous stems. So going into this, if I filter by place to Wisconsin, I think Brennan is the only person who's seen this in Wisconsin. Yeah.
At least.
Did you not put the exact ID on the other one, Brennan? Because it's not coming up.
No, you had it. I thought it was on there. So I'm only looking at your screen over here.
Okay, sure. Sorry.
If you go back,
We only have a couple minutes left anyway. We might go into this in depth in a different one because this kind of is continuing. Oh yes, this is the one in the wild. Okay, this is kind of a continuing saga. Like you sent it to Django, I think, who's known as Heel Splitter on iNaturalist to culture. To what did you send it to him to do?
He was gonna, well, he just wanted to look at it, I guess. I mean, but he's gonna do some sequencing on it. Sounds like he's halfway through getting that done.
Cool.
Yeah, John was working on that group and doing revisions and describing the species and such.
Yeah. Is the Porothialiaceae still family? I don't know. That was his thing, but then I couldn't find any info on Porothialiaceae lately. What oh, it's in there. My bad. Okay, I'm tweaking. Ignore me.
All right. So I'm just very excited for this to be happening, and yeah, to find out about it. It's inspired me to try to keep kind of mycological material and maybe see it too. So one that I think Brennan has done before and also recommended was collecting the Arascalpium, the toothpick fungus, because you can just pick up the I'll show people what we're talking about here. You can just pick up the little pine cone or whatnot that it's, or not pine cone, but the little substrate that it's growing out of. And if you kind of keep it moist and happy, it can put out another fruiting body, potentially.
I'm working on that one too.
Yeah. Which would be fun for all sorts of things, like just observing, show and tell.
What family is that one in?
The earpick fungus? Or this one?
Its own family.
I think it's got families its own name in it.
Yeah, Arascal. How do I say this? Arascalpiaceae.
But it's in the Russelales. It's in the order of Russell as the brittle, which is crazy.
It is crazy. One of the
Another oddball to go with Von Darswia or whatever.
There's so many weird things in that order. But Brennan, that is such a cool find, that Caloptella. Do you know what the substrate was? Like what kind of twig?
I couldn't figure out what it was. I went back there to try to see, do a survey of the plants that were around, but I couldn't figure out what plant it was. When I found it, it was pretty decomposed. So I'm not a plant guy, so can't tell you.
Yeah, that's hard too. Like a decomposing twig by itself. But that's just so cool.
I can tell you, it grew on pretty much whatever twigs I threw at it. So I did a spore culture, like a spore drop right onto some herbaceous stems that I just picked from outside that I sterilized. It ate all that up, so it'll grow apparently on a bunch of different stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we are at 7 p.m. I was going to look at Gyrometra, but some other time. So welcome to everybody, and thank you for participating in the iNaturalist chat portion. And Brennan can introduce our speaker.
Cool. Well, I think I saw Robin enter the Zoom. Welcome. Very excited to have you here. Robin is a Wisconsin native, if you all didn't know or don't know about Robin yet. At 31, Robin committed himself to his principles of living in service of the earth and all living things on earth. Robin's aim is to set an example for what's possible in society, in a society that at times can seem antithetical to life. Robin has recently achieved, saw this, a wardrobe made of 100% natural materials. Tonight he's going to talk about his entire year of growing and foraging all of his own food. Does that sound pretty all right, Robin? You can feel free to correct and add.
That's wonderful, Brennan. Thank you.
Of course.
And Walker, I saw your reaction. You look excited. Is that right?
Oh, sorry. My friend Amalia happened to join at the same time.
Well, welcome. Welcome, Amalia.
So sorry to steal your thunder.
No thunder has been stolen because thunder isn't owned by anyone and thus cannot be stolen. Well, I want to thank Jen for reaching out to me in January to invite me to join fellow mushroom lovers. Okay, I want to put this view on gallery, nice, so I can see as many of you as possible. And I would like to acknowledge that I am here in this room by myself in the realm of humans. There are no other humans in this room, but there are 85 or so of us humans together connected right now through the internet. And although a small part of me mourns for the fact that I am not in person with you, I'm celebrating that we are here together under the, through the internet. I would so love to be in Wisconsin with all of you right now. It's experiencing the spring and the excitement and the eagerness for the mushrooms that are arriving. I am in Santa Cruz, California at the moment, and I just arrived yesterday from Los Angeles, where I was for the last month. And prior to that, I was in Wisconsin for the winter in northern Wisconsin. And I'm really happy to be here with all of you and really excited to discuss some of the things that we are all very mutually passionate about. And I'm going to speak for hopefully no more than, say, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, so that we have over half the time for questions and so that I can enjoy being more with you. Because I will say that although I have a lot to share, there is an element of the idea of speaking and solely me speaking for extended periods of time no longer being the way in which that I really desire to interact with others. But it is the place that I am as a person who speaks. And so I'm learning to navigate that in a way that feels the most connected for everyone. And so I invite you to just know that that's my goal, is that we all are connected and that we're experiencing this in as joyful, loving way as possible. On that note, I hope that was not feeling too much like a segue to you and was potentially feeling like exactly where we're supposed to be right now. And I am going to focus on my year of growing and foraging 100% of my food. But in order to do that, I would like to go back a ways and go back to my roots. I grew up in northern Wisconsin in the town of Ashland. How many of you have been to Ashland? Raise your hands or do the little emojis or however this tech stuff works. I see a lot of hands raised. How many of you, oh, Cheryl M raised her hand. Nice. How many of you have swam in Lake Superior or Gitchagumi? Okay, I feel instantly, my heart is instantly warmed with that connection, that shared connection. How many of you would say that you love the waters of what we call Wisconsin, that you have a genuine love inside of you? I love that. And now, how many of you would say that the waters of Wisconsin actually course through your veins and are a part of your DNA, and that you were formed, that in your DNA is the waters of Wisconsin? Raise your hands if you can feel that, even just a little bit. And raise your hand if you'd like to feel that more, like each year you'd like to feel more and more of that, like a deep feeling of that you are. What was that? Or was that an accident? Okay, perhaps an accident, but nice to hear that voice interaction. So, and that's what I would like as well. I grew up in Ashland and I grew up with a single mom, and there were 4 of us kids together in a little 2-bedroom house on 3rd and Beezer, just 2 blocks from what we call the hot pond. That was the fishing spot. I don't know if any of you have been there by the power plant. And my favorite places were the hot pond and Prentice Park. That's where I wanted to be at every moment that I could. But I wasn't there because I wasn't there as much as I'd like to be, because my mom was quite busy raising 4 kids and we were very low income. And so with all that, I had a yearning for a deeper connection that was not fed as much as I really, really desired it to be. And in my earlier days, I became very attracted to what we call the American dream, to have a nice big house, a fancy car, a nuclear family. I didn't have any of these things. You know, I wanted a lot of money, and all of this there was one thing that I really wanted, and that was to be normal. It was to fit in, to be like others. I felt like I was an outsider, and I really wanted to fit in. So the last thing I was going to be doing as someone who wanted to be fitting in was to go be eating mushrooms from the woods. That's not what you do if you want to fit in. Now, with a lot of celebration, I can say here today, we fit in because we eat mushrooms, not because we don't eat mushrooms. Or maybe we don't eat them, but we spend time with them. We love them. And I have a few mushrooms right now with me. I thought I would love to be sitting here with the mushrooms that are most a part of my life. Can anyone guess what is in this bowl? I'd love to hear. What do you all think?
Lion's mane.
Lion's mane is a guess. If I was so lucky, it would be lion's mane in this quantity. Puffball. It's got a puffball look, and I have puffball in a jar, but it's not puffball. This is maitake, or hen of the woods. This is one of the mushrooms that I forage the most, and in very large quantities. In fact, this maitake is from the cemetery in Ashland, which I didn't say that. Nobody knows maitake grows in the cemetery in Ashland. You did not hear that from me. Forget that was ever stated, or not. Do whatever you want with that information. And that's one of my main mushrooms that I cook and eat a lot. I blend it into a powder, and then I add it to my wild rice. And then this is my other mushroom powder that's very much strongly a part of my life. This is, can anyone guess what's in here, perhaps? Whoop, a whole bunch fell onto my keyboard.
That looks like reishi to me.
Okay, we've got reishi, chaga. Both of those are in here. It's probably 50% reishi, 10% chaga. What else?
Turkey tail, often in that blend, or Trametes versicolor, rather.
Yes, about 20% turkey tail from some woods in Madison, Wisconsin. And we have reishi, chaga, turkey tail, and maitake. Now, I would generally have lion's mane in there, but that's one mushroom that I have not created a relationship to have in abundant quantities. It's just a rare find for me to have lion's mane, and I'm certainly not spending the at least $20 a pound to get it, because I do have access to this. And then I have a bunch of reishi here, and this is actually this is the first mushroom. Maybe you can help me identify it. This is the first mushroom that I have been connected with, I think in 2024, that has been growing out of the ground, because I have been in climates where none have returned yet. So I just harvested this. It's a pretty indiscreet mushroom, so I wouldn't be surprised if nobody really knows. But any thoughts on what type of okay, it's giving Amanita. Wait, it's giving Amanita vibes, or like that's a type of Amanita called giving Amanita? Because I've never heard of that.
Walker is saying it's giving Amanita vibes, although he can speak to it if he wants.
I'd love it if there was a Amanita called the Giving Amanita. That would be wonderful. Could one of you maybe coin that and spread that around, possibly? Could be a young agaricus. I think it's an Amanita. I got Amanita vibes. It had at the base a very egg bulbous. It was coming out of an egg, which, as you can see, I am not a mycologist. I love mushrooms. I love plants. I love humans. I love animals. But I am not an ist of any of those things, or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have one other mushroom here, and that is, does anyone know what mushroom this is? That is accurate. I see one comment from Lauren Ray and Jack Johnson. I think one of the greatest revolutions that humanity could have would be to remember that a mushroom is something that comes from the soil, from the earth, and has no negative qualities. There is no concept of a negative quality of a mushroom. They have qualities. There is no good, there is no bad, there is no evil plant or fungi. And so for me, that's one of the most important things that we can do as people who are lovers of the plants, of the animals, of the mushrooms, is to normalize this basic common sense that how could we possibly make a plant, an animal, or a fungi illegal? How could any of these lives be illegal? And so a lot of that's what a lot of my exploration is. And so my year of growing and foraging 100% of my food, which is where I immersed in mushrooms, that's when I really began my immersion in mushrooms in 2018, was to deepen this experiment of stepping outside of societal structures and societal norms. So as I said, I was living in this state of normalcy, and I was living in this American dream until I was about 25. And that's when I woke up and realized the way in which we have designed our societal structures is causing an incredible amount of destruction and injustice and inequity to all beings. Even the 1% are existing under this state of oppression and exploitation. And I said to myself, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to step outside of it. And that has been my job. My full-time job has been to unravel the web of consumerism in which I had so deeply woven myself into, and to do it in a public manner that takes others along in the journey with me of unraveling their web of consumerism and delusion and breaking free. And so it was 2011 that I began that journey. And at the beginning, I had the question, would it be possible to step outside of this broken global industrial food system? And instead of eating in a way that every bite that I took, I was taking a bite away from the planet, that I could actually eat in a way that was connected to the earth? That was this early concept. Is that even possible in 21st century Western dominated society? And so I was taking it step by step from 2011, and I was breaking free in many ways, breaking many of those strands, those elements of the web, and rewriting a new way of being. And after making multiple hundreds of changes in my life, like probably at least 300 different solid, measurable changes in my life, of my food, my water, my energy, my waste, my transportation, my thoughts, my relationships, my way that I spend money, my clothes, everything, my smell, where I would go, how I would move myself there, everything. It was 2017, after 6 years, that I decided it is now time for me to immerse in this exploration of stepping completely outside of, to the best of my ability, the global industrial food system, and seeing if I could grow and forage every bite of my food for a year. So that's what I set out to do. I arrived in Orlando, Florida, I believe December 17th, 2017, or within a few days of that. And I had no property. I had a couple $1,000s at the time, maybe, a backpack and a bicycle. That was everything that I owned. And I now had the challenge of, in 6 months, to be growing and to be consuming, to be eating 100% food that I was growing and foraging. So I landed there and I gave myself 6 months with minimal growing experience, minimal foraging experience, and in a state where I had no foraging or growing experience, Florida. I chose Florida because as a new gardener and forager, I really liked the idea of the comfort and ease around having a much larger season, but primarily because I left Wisconsin in 2011 because I have always wanted to leave the winter. Always, always, always. I remember reading Dr. Dolittle and learning about the Polynesian Islands and watching The Truman Show and learning about Fiji. I always knew I was going to go be in warm places. And here I am right now in Santa Cruz, California, which is a very interesting place. So anyway, that was another bit of a segue, but that's all that my life is one big segue and many segues in between. But here I was, and I had to immerse in growing and foraging 100% of my food. And I had to learn how to do every single ingredient that I wanted to have. So if I wanted mushrooms, I needed to know how to forage mushrooms or grow mushrooms. If I wanted honey, I needed to raise bees. If I wanted salt, I had to figure out how to harvest it from the ocean. If I wanted really tasty meals, I needed to grow those herbs and the garlic and the onion, or learn the herbs that I could forage. If I wanted a bedtime tea, I had to find the pineapple weed. If I wanted something bubbly to drink, I had to grow and forage the ingredients, put them together in a vessel, and wait for those things to get bubbly. There was no going to the store. Many times I had to plan ahead for months of what I would be eating. I counted the calories in which I was planting or harvesting in a day. I had to really pay attention to my food deeply because there was no other options. There was no backups. There was no grocery stores. There were no restaurants. There was no ordering supplements online, no pharmaceuticals, no multivitamins. Literally everything that would go into my mouth for the entire year had to be foraged. And to the point where I no longer allowed myself to taste plants from others' gardens as a form of identification. I would not let it enter my mouth, to the point where this was at a point where I was dating, and someone that I was dating had chapstick on. And I said, if we're going to kiss, you'll need to remove that chapstick because that is not entering onto my mouth area. Even I was trying to immerse as deeply as I could. The exception was toothpaste, which I spit out, but I did consume small amounts of toothpaste during that year, I'm sure. So it was not perfection in that realm, but it was taking it to a very deep level that I could. And so over those 6 months, I did the best that I could to learn what I needed to know, largely through immersive education. Visiting gardens, community gardens, farms, permaculture centers, going on plant walks, going to the Florida Earth Skills Gathering, which is where I met Sam Thayer for the first time, all the way down in Florida, 2 Wisconsinites. And I would love to share that story. So if that comes up in the Q&A, that's actually a pretty interesting story. And so I was also, though, using the internet, reading books, everywhere that I could get the education that I needed. And so what I set out to do then was I wasn't doing anything too unusual. I was just taking together all the information from people and putting it into a package that would allow me to meet my needs of food and medicine for the entire year. So I didn't discover anything. I didn't really figure anything out. I learned from others. And of course, I'd like to acknowledge that, a lot who I was learning from were 21st century US Americans primarily. Many of them were actually people that had moved to the United States from other countries in the Caribbean, South America. Community of people who grow food that come from the so you could say peasant farmers of the world, where this has been a way of life. a way of being where there is no word called foraging. It's just going out and harvesting your food. And so to go back, everything that I know is because people have had relationships to humans for, people have had relationships to plants for thousands and thousands of years. And so indigenous cultures have stewarded this knowledge and brought it to us today. Sometimes they have shared it with us willingly, and sometimes it has been stolen away through, colonization, through domination. And so, I grew up in Ashland, so that's the land of the Anishinaabe people, and I'm incredibly grateful to be able to learn this knowledge and have this knowledge exist often through their stewardship. And so a lot of what I was growing was yucca, or also called cassava. I was growing wild yams, Dioscorea alata. I was growing sweet potatoes. I was growing greens like moringa, the vitamin tree or the tree of life. I was growing chaya, not chia, chaya, chaya, which is very high in cyanide. You have to cook it thoroughly to remove that cyanide to eat it, but it's considered a superfood. And a lot of foods that don't grow in Wisconsin: Malabar spinach, Suriname spinach, longevity spinach, Miami spinach, shiso, shiso's not actually a perennial, but these perennial semi-tropical greens. There's one that's on the tip of my mind that I just can't think of at the moment, that maybe it'll come to me later, but it's one that I would like to call attention to. So I was focused a lot on perennials, and I was also focused a lot on annuals. I focused on getting annuals in the ground first because you have a very quick yield with annuals. You put a carrot seed in the ground and you can have hundreds of pounds of carrots in 3 months. Or you put a couple hundred seeds in the ground. Well, let's see, quarter pound of carrot. No, that's too big. 1/10 of a pound of carrot. So that's 10 seeds per pound. And then if you want 100 pounds of carrots, that's 1,000 carrot seeds. So this is the type of math that I was doing. This was the type of math that I was doing all the time, because I needed to know how many heads of garlic I was going to get, because I couldn't go to the store and buy it, and I couldn't go to the farmer's market. And I needed for sure to know my calories. So I would count my days, and actually what I learned from Sam Thayer, calorie days. So a calorie day is so if you're out foraging and you harvest 2,000 calories in a day, you have harvested a calorie day. So I would measure my productivity often in how many potential calories I planted or how many potential calories I had stored away. And so it was a very deep immersion in having to understand the complexities of actually supplying all of your food. And 6 months turned into 10 months because I was also involved in a lot of community projects. We started the Free Seed Project, community fruit trees, and gardens for the people. And so we were planting gardens in other people's front yard. We planted over 100 fruit trees in the neighborhood. And we provided seed packs to over 2,000 people across the country that spring who didn't have access to seeds due to financial barriers. So I started all of these programs at the same time as I was just trying to grow and forage all my food, and at the same time as I was building a tiny house from 99% secondhand materials. So to answer one of the most common questions, is it possible to still have a life and do other things while growing and foraging 100% of your food? The answer is very clear and resounding yes. You can still do a lot of other things. And I was also doing a lot of media because that's my intentions, is to share these messages. And so after 10 months, I dived in. My first breakfast that I had was about 10 ingredients from the garden and foraged. And amazingly, it was the first meal of my entire life that I had 100% grown or foraged, or even the first meal of my entire life that was 100% homegrown and foraged ingredients at all. So I was really jumping off the deep end that day. Hello. Hi.
Yes, we have a youthful visitor. Hello.
So Walker asked, did I have chickens to start? And the answer is no. And the reason why is because if I was to have chickens, I would have had to have grown or foraged 100% of their feed, because I couldn't buy feed to feed animals. That would just be outsourcing. That was just my own self-imposed guidelines into the project. So I did eat some squirrels, and my bait for the squirrels was sweet potatoes from my garden. And on day like 250, I did break a rule and use a worm that I bought, not that I foraged, to catch a trout in northern Wisconsin. That was 3 of the times that I broke a little bit of the rules. One time I accidentally had a tiny bit of salt, a few grains from a friend's plate. I made 100% homegrown and foraged meal and made it with them, but they added salt to their plate and I forgot, and I ate their leftovers. So that's how I ate one industrial item during that time. And then there was eating a loquat one time from a domesticated tree, and this worm situation. So the year began, and I had 12 months, November 11th, 2018 to November 11th, 2019. And I was based in Florida, and the biggest I had enough food. I had plenty of food. I had way more food than I needed, and I had a lot to share with others. The most time intensive part was the processing the food, the storing of the food. That was what took the most time, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. You have a long day out foraging and you think you're done, you get home, and then the real work actually begins of processing and storing these foods. So that was my life to a large extent. Harvesting, processing, storing, and I loved it. But it was also incredibly, incredibly time challenging because of all the other things I was doing as well. And after about 10 days, 7 days, I poked my belly and I realized, wow, for the first time in years, my belly doesn't hurt. My belly had been inflamed for years from eating processed foods. And after 7 to 10 days of eating no processed foods, I was like, wow, the inflammation that went away. I saw a very quick change in that regard. And my health was in generally high places. My biggest struggle was getting enough fat and protein. And it's hard to know anything for certain because everything is connected. So it's hard to isolate exact things. But it seemed pretty clear to me that I was struggling with getting enough fat. I wasn't losing weight. But I had some brain fogginess and my energy just wasn't quite high. And it seemed very clear to me that this was a deficiency in what would be most accessible to the body from animals, whether that would be fish or red meat or, potentially fats like butter, ghee, or animal fats, or this seemed very clear what I was lacking, because I was eating like an entire coconut per day, which has about 3 ounces of oil. So I was getting a substantial amount of coconut oil and a substantial amount of protein, and I had a lot of pigeon peas or gandules and southern peas or cow peas. And of course, I was eating over 1 pound of greens on most days. So as far as protein from greens, I was getting a very, very substantial quantity of that. And it seemed very clear to me that I was struggling. I wasn't, the interesting thing is that the skill that I had most coming into this was fishing. I loved fishing. When I was about a junior in high school, I went fishing 180 days out of a 365-day year. So I've loved fishing ever since I can really remember. And interestingly enough, fishing is where I struggled the most. I had a really hard time catching enough fish, and it was like, what is going on here? It almost started to feel like it was a curse. Everybody who I went out with had their worst day of fishing. They would say, this is our worst day of fishing. I even hired a guide, and we caught one fish, but it was such a big fish that I wanted to release it because it was a a real breeder. It was a 27-inch sea trout in Sebastian Inlet area, and I'm not going to keep a 27-inch sea trout. I want 15, 16-inch sea trouts. So anyway, there was some real struggle, and a Goliath grouper could have fed me. Yes, Walker. And so I decided to come up to Wisconsin in the summer. So I packed my bags. I had over 120,000 calories in my duffel bags. That's 2,000 calories a day for 60 days. So I could spend at least 2 months up there surviving. But the key was foraging. I was leaving my gardens behind, and now I had a couple of months where I was going to be like really immersing in foraging, really deeply immersing in foraging, and come back to my homeland and learn the plants of my childhood. I was so elated. I arrived in Ashland in mid-July, I think about mid-July 2018. And I knew I would be in the area for a few months. I think a couple is what I thought, but it ended up being, I think, over 3 months. And I learned so much. I really dived into the mushrooms there. That's when I really deepened my love for the mushrooms. Mushroom foraging in Florida is there, but it's with sand and dry, so it's just nowhere near as abundant. And so I got to Wisconsin, and that's when I learned about king boletes or porcini. We had an incredible year where you could fill 5-gallon buckets full of porcini, which I wish I had some porcini with me right now. That's one of my I love boletes. They're absolutely one of my favorite mushrooms. And so it was a beautiful time. And when I went up there, two of the key priorities, absolute key priorities. Can anyone guess going up there? What were my key priorities? What were the things that I really wanted to harvest? There's 4 that come to mind, 5 that come to mind as my absolute biggest key priorities for going up there and the plants that I wanted to work with or animals. So
I have a fungy guess.
a fungy guess.
Yeah, maybe chanterelles that time of year.
I did get into chanterelles, and that was something that I was very excited about. I don't know if that would be in the top 5, but if not, maybe number 6. So it was whitefish, fatty fish, whether it's lake trout or whitefish. Exactly what I was seeking. The fattiness of those fish. Also, deer that were hit by cars. Some people call them roadkill deers. I call them deer that are hit by cars because they're still a deer first and foremost. So deer first is the way that I look at it. And then, so fish, deer, apples, applesauce, eating unlimited large fruits from the wild. I was so excited about that. And then pineapple weed. I wanted to reconnect with this plant of my childhood. I was very excited about pineapple weed and wild rice, Monoman. Those were the ones that really drew me back. That year, I didn't get to, I don't know if I even made it out wild ricing or not. It was in the next years when wild rice became the plant that has changed me more than any other plant. And brings me back to Wisconsin more strongly than any other force within Wisconsin. Well, the water does it pretty solidly as well. So really interesting thing. I caught some lake trout. I went out with my friend Ben in the Apostle Islands area, and actually the most disheartening day was that day. I caught about a 25 pound lake trout. So we're talking about a lake trout that would, wow. I mean, this thing was the solution to all of my problems. Everything that I needed was in that lake trout. But it was big. I don't know what term is generally used, like super breeder. Like these are the ones that help keep the population really solid. And so I looked at Ben and I said, what would you do? And he said, I'd let it go. So I let it go. And that was hard because everything I needed was in that fish. And then he looks at me like, 10 minutes later, and he says, now, when you said, what would you do? Were you asking what you should do? And he said, you should have kept it, man. I don't need to, because I catch lake trout all the time. And my heart sunk to my chest, deep in my chest. And it didn't come out for a couple of days. And the reason why is that the fisheries there, they don't go by size in the nets. When you buy the smoked fish in Cornucopia and Bayfield that I would buy myself at the store. And here I was, doing the right thing in a way, but I don't really think so. I think that the nourishment that I could have brought into my body with that fish would have been a serving way to honor that fish and to honor the life cycle of Lake Superior. But fortunately, we did catch some smaller ones. And the next day, that same day, for the next few days, I ate about a pound of lake trout every day. And I actually put them into a pressure cooker and made broth from the entire body. The only thing I didn't eat was the intestines and the gills. And maybe a little bit, but we're talking about eating 98% of the fish. And the head just breaks down. You eat the eyes, the brains, the cartilage, and it's incredible. And within one day, I saw the fat on my body change. Within one day, I felt more clarity. And I said to myself, and I know this sounds, a little bit out there, but the lake trout became part of me. The lake trout entered my body and became a part of my body. My body sucked in, sponged in what it so deeply craved from that lake trout. And the next day I was part lake trout. I know that sounds, in our society that has become so disconnected, where to say that is to jeopardize your sanity in this society, but it's true. Every indigenous culture that ever has existed has had such a relationship with the plants that they felt like they were the plants. They were part of them. The people of the wild rice, the people of the corn, the people of the acorns, the people of the wheat, the people of the teff, the people of the quinoa, and on and on and on. They were a manifestation of those plants or animals, the people of the buffalo, the people of the whales. And that was a pretty profound day for me to actually physically be able to see that the lake trout became a part of me. That was objective. That was just clearly a fact. And so to be able to embody that fact was a profound day for me, to be able to embody it in mindset. And that's what I'll wrap up with, so we have plenty of time for questions, is that for me, the plants it's more, the whole idea was, could I grow and forage 100% of my food? But really, it's, can I disconnect from these destructive systems and reconnect to systems that are in balance, that are serving everyone and everything involved, the people, the plants, the animals, the fungi, the bacteria, the yeast, the viruses, the tardigrades, if that's how you say it, everything. That's what I want to be a part of. And that's what being involved with plants and mushrooms has helped me to do. I do not speak the same as I did before. The plants have changed my language. One of my greatest inspirations is Robin Wall Kimmerer. How beautiful that I get to share a first name with her. I didn't really realize that because I went by Rob for a long time when I was following her. I love to be a fellow Robin with her. The Anishinaabe word for Robin is Opichi. Okay, Ashley's question is, what are you drinking in the jar? I'll get to that. Okay, it is time for questions. So to wrap up, to just say, I'm excited about connecting with the plants, connection with the mushrooms. And what I'll say is that I'm very grateful to be here with all of you. I spoke longer than I was planning to, but I'm happy with the amount of time that I spoke. I'm very excited with the amount of time. And if if I don't know if you ever go over, but I would be happy to go over. I will share that now that I will be happy to continue asking questions for those that would like to. And on that note, I love you all very much. I'm grateful for all that you are doing in the world. I'm so grateful that the Wisconsin Mycological Society exists. That is not a placeholder statement. I am so incredibly grateful that all of you exist and that all of you are dedicating part of your life to sharing the magic of all mushrooms. Love you too, Ashley. So let's hear questions. I don't know what the best way to do this would be. If we want to take turns unmuting to actually ask, I'd love to hear voices. So I don't know how the best way to do that is. I'm going to turn that over to whoever is the best at facilitating that, actually.
So usually people do kind of favor putting things in the chat, but I will say to people, if you want to unmute yourself, please do. If you prefer to put it in the chat, I or Robin can read your question out loud and then answer it. If you are looking for where to unmute yourself and you're not seeing it, feel free to put in the chat, please unmute me, and I will find you in the list and do that. So I will be able to see it, or Brennan will do it. We do already have a couple questions. So besides, I guess we could start off with the easy softball question. Ashley's question: What is in your jar? What are you drinking?
Fortunately, I just changed that over. This now is this. This is the chaga, reishi, turkey tail, and my taki.
Mm-hmm.
Prior, what was in the jar was actually, which is quite rare for me, I'm staying at a friend's house, and it's a bag of mushrooms, and it is a mushroom master blend of 10 mushroom species and 3 botanical adaptogens. I'm not going to share the brand just because I don't need to bring corporations into the conversation at the moment, although I do support a lot of the, corporations that are bringing mushrooms to people in this accessible way. And there was also golden milk mixed in there, turmeric, ginger, much better than the Reese's. Oh, I just used a brand. Crap.
We could edit it out for you. We could bleep it if you want.
It's all right.
Yeah, we won't put that in the recording.
Hey, I am who I am. I did what I did. I ate a Reese's peanut butter cup today, and it did not satisfy my desires. So I'm very happy to be drinking this right now instead. So, yes.
Okay, so on to the next. There's I think 1, 2, 3 questions in the chat, and I'll ask those, and then we'll say pause for anyone to unmute who wants to.
Wonderful.
So first one in the chat that I see is Walker's, which is, what percentage of your food do you continue to forage and grow for yourself, if that's something you have a number?
Right now, I would say 50 to 75% of my diet is foraged. I carry with me a couple buckets of wild rice. So I'm eating wild rice a lot. I carry with me pressure canned salmon and whitefish, and also bullhead from Lake Superior. So I'm eating wild rice and fish a lot. I have a lot of dehydrated herbal blends for drinking, my mushroom mixes, my dehydrated mushrooms, and then I have a lot of some dried fruit like choke cherry leather with me. I have today I had deer liver from a deer that I harvested on Sanborn Avenue in Ashland this fall that I was there. So 50 to 75% right now, and a lot of days 100%. That will change as I'm currently downsizing my life and working on being more mobile by foot, and so I won't be carrying so much food with me. But I hope to continue to eat a lot of I will continue to eat. Well, it's tough. I hope to continue the numbers to be quite high like that, but they don't have to be foraged by me. They can be foraged by community. And I'm also quite a fan of domesticated foods as well. I would choose wild foods over domesticated foods generally, but there's a lot of domesticated foods that I'm absolutely joyful to be eating and working with as medicine.
Oh yeah, and there's certainly a lot of things kind of in between too, like a lot of apples that we might find that are old orchard escapees and things like that.
Yes.
Where it's kind of right in between. But that thought aside, Wesley Wesley's question in the chat is kind of very similar to Walker's, but I'm going to ask it anyway in case it prompts other thoughts. Is since 2018, what food habits have you kept? What has changed? Would you go back?
Yeah, what food habits that I have kept since 2018 is that I find food growing everywhere and I eat it. I did not do that before. Wherever I am eating food. And I'm here in Northern California. I was in Southern California just up until yesterday morning. And out here, in desert areas, I am finding food and I am eating it, from north to south. When I was in Wisconsin in January, I was still eating uh, uh, what's the nanny berries and high bush cranberries even in January, and watercress at Prentice Park. So wherever I'm foraging. I actually spoke at Coachella last weekend and I managed to forage at Coachella. That was someone on stage asked me, do you think there's anything around here? And I was like, I'm gonna find out. And I ended up foraging some I don't know what it was. It was like a peppercress of sorts. In the mustard brassica realm, and then lamb's quarter as well. I found some lamb's quarter. So yes, that's one big thing. And I just eat a lot less processed foods. I get into the processed foods sometimes, but for the most part, if it's not real food, I try not to put it in my body. And I am tempted and I do it. But I just put a lot less things in my body that aren't like recognizable as real foods. I just have a hard time after a year of eating pure foods from the earth, putting foods in my body that have ingredients that I have no real clue what they are, or that are completely controlled by corporations. I just don't want those foods in my body, but I still do. I still absolutely do put them in my body for sure.
We have another just comment really quick in the chat from Brennan, one of our board members, and he said let's not forget to mention that you're familiar with Sam Thayer. Do you
Sure.
want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I could share the Sam Thayer story. Would you like to hear?
He's a friend of the club. Yes, please.
Wonderful. Would you like to hear like the 1-minute version or the 4-minute version of my relationship with Sam Thayer?
The 4.
I see some 4s. Okay, any veto on the 4? Okay, the floor is spoken. So I was in 2018, I went to the Florida Earth Skills Gathering, and I wanted to learn about the wild yam, Dioscorea alata, that I heard could grow up to 150 pounds in the wild, 150 pounds, my weight. And then also I wanted to take a class which was on making hickory nut milk. I was very excited about that. Hickory nut milk. Oh, interesting. Making my own nut milk from nuts that I harvest from the wild. And also oil, hickory nut oil. Wow, that was pretty fascinating. So Sam Thayer ended up being the teacher of the hickory class. How many of you have ever spoken about hickory nuts with Sam, or heard Sam speak about hickory nuts? I don't see any hands. Okay, I'm sure you've spoken about him with other things, but hickory nuts are one of his great passions, and I was so elated to be in the class. So it came out that he was from Wisconsin, and I don't remember exactly how it happened. But I said, hey, I'm from Ashland, Wisconsin. He's from Bruce, Wisconsin, but he lived in Ashland, Wisconsin. He's like, no way. Here we are all the way down in Florida. You don't often meet, Wisconsinites, one thing, but to meet another person from northern Wisconsin is not something you find too often out there. And so we wanted to talk a little bit. And so he says, yeah, I was the manager of Little Caesars Pizza. And I said, whoa, I remember you from standing in the back of the Little Caesars. This is on Lakeshore Drive, Highway 2, east side of Ashland. And what happened was I would go to Little Caesars from well, this particularly was 2003 to 2005, my later years of high school, on my lunch breaks from lifeguarding, and I would get Little Caesars like daily during that time, and Sam was working there, so we interacted quite a few times. And then so that was a short interaction, and the next day I'm out and about. I think I was under a hickory nut tree, and Sam's just running along, and he sees me, he runs over, and he goes, "You know what? I do remember you." And he's 10 years older than me. So, you know, I was a teenager and he was in his late 20s. And we created that connection in summer of 2008 or spring of 2018. And then
That's awesome.
We kept in touch, you know, both very passionate about plants. And I don't remember what the next thing was. The next connection may have been me coming to the Midwest Wild Harvest Festival. And the first year I volunteered a little bit there, but the second year I was the keynote speaker at Midwest Wild Harvest Festival. And so Sam and I developed a pretty substantial relationship. I visited him and stayed with him for a couple of days. We did something that we're not allowed to tell anybody. And that's all I can say about that. But you're welcome to ask him, and he's not going to tell you. But I wish I could tell you, because it's not something that I never do. Actually, never mind. It's the only time I've ever done it. So that's all I can say about, or I could say more, but that's all I'll say about that for now. And then, you know, as we continue deepening our relationship, you know, I learned more about his story, and it turned out that it might have been, let's see, it was about 1995. I can't remember the exact year. It turned out we lived across from the streets from each other, and our living room windows actually looked into each other's living room windows. And we didn't realize that until after multiple years of connecting. So yeah, I really enjoy my connection with him. And half of what I know is because of Sam. I so love spending time with him, and I so love seeing his development as a more compassionate human. I've really seen him become a more compassionate human, and that's what the plants do. So yes, that was 4 minutes.
Awesome. Yeah, Sam is actually going to be at our Tri-County Foray this year. He's going to be doing a VIP plant walk for us or whatever. So if anyone is interested in learning more about Sam, he'll be there. Also, anyone who is interested in hickory nut oil, as you mentioned earlier, Sam actually does sell that online through Foragers Harvest, and I got some of that this year, and it's really, really lovely. So anyone who's interested in it, try it out. But I think it sells out pretty quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think you can get any of it right now.
Not right now. Yeah.
Which there's another question in the chat, and I'm gonna selfishly ask my question first, real quick. Just like, have you ever made hickory bark syrup?
I have not ever made hickory bark syrup.
Okay, that's something Melissa, who was just talking, taught me to do. So it's fun.
Okay.
It is something you would collect off of. You just collect the bark in a sustainable way, like try not to hurt the tree. We at one point collected a lot off of a tree that was very clearly condemned, like they were going to
shag bark specifically.
Yeah, bark hickory. I should be clear. So you collect that shag bark, and you can also find it like the loose bits that are not going to hurt the tree. And then you, correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, you basically boil it and you keep adding sugar until it syrupizes.
First of all, you have to remove any lichens from it, because lichens are not actually great for you to ingest all the time.
Some of them, but
so you have to make sure the pieces are clean.
Let them out in nature. Go do that in the.
You toast them in the oven at like 350 for like 20 minutes, and then you boil them, and then you like once you have that like toasted flavor in the water, and the water gets real dark, then you like strain out your water, and then you add sugar or honey, whichever you want to add, and it has this wonderful, wonderful flavor when you're done with it.
Thank you for sharing. I will try one day. Serena has a question that she would like to say out loud. So Serena, what is your question?
I actually have two questions. First of all, thank you for coming today and sharing your story. Um, my first question is, I'm curious how you did cooking with certain equipment like pots and pans releasing harmful chemicals. And then my second question is, did you have a support group or like was the journey sometimes lonesome and difficult? And if so, how did you stay connected with people and stay
Yes.
emotionally healthy?
Yes. So as far as cooking, I generally cook over a quality stainless steel or cast iron. You know, that's what I try to stick to. And not every way that I cooked was necessarily the most beneficial. Sometimes it was the way that I just needed to get it done with the time that I had. But I didn't have oil for the first 7 months, so that meant I was making lots of soups and stews and not frying, or burning things really. So, definitely pretty healthy cooking for sure. A lot of steaming and such. And then I traveled with an Instant Pot actually, and they are such. I mean, as far as a foraging tool goes, they have been incredible. I'm not too big of a fan of a user of a lot of technology, but that is a technology that I do use, and they have stainless steel pots as well. And then, did I have support? Absolutely. I couldn't have done this without people. That's the big thing um, is to well, actually, yeah, that's the big thing is that this takes community and that we don't need to do this alone. We want to do this through community. It's so much more beautiful and fun through community. That said, it's nice to do a lot of this on our own as well, but really it was the support of others that made all of this possible. So I am doing shorter answers now because I know we didn't get to nearly as many questions as I actually really would have liked to. Do we have just one more minute, or are we going to go a little bit long?
We have time. We always kind of like go as long as people want to stay. Honestly, if the speaker wants to bail, the speaker bails. But
in that case,
yeah.
I will share for another up to half an hour if people.
Thank you so much for your time. So I was gonna ask a question from the chat and then switch to somebody who wanted to ask aloud, and then kind of go back and forth until we've done them, or you feel like you gotta go. But so Janine has asked. Oh, it just moved. I'm sorry. Oh my god. I have recently purchased a home near a wetland. What do you forage in a wetland?
What do you forage in a wetland? Well, it depends on where your wetland is in the in the world. But in a wetland in Wisconsin, very much depends on the type of wetland, of course, as well. There's different types of wetlands, but cattails are going to be one of the real common plants that you would forage, as well as wapato. And you can harvest the tuber of the wapato or the leaves of the wapato. And those would be some very substantial foods. Edges of wetlands can produce a lot of greens. For example, if you have a creek or a fresh spring coming somewhere that is in that wetland, that's where you might find watercress. Oh, yep. Someone said watercress at the moment that I was saying it. But watercress is, it takes very clean water, so you don't find that necessarily I don't find that in most. It's more particular.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that it's a non-native plant or?
I don't know whether it's.
I thought so. At least the regular watercress. And the other thing I thought I had learned about it, I collected some out of a spring in the South Kettles, and I read up on it before I ate it, and it was a really good example of why you kind of need to read about things or talk to people who know what they're doing about things, because I found out that especially with agricultural runoff, you get sheep flukes.
It can happen. The key, if you don't, as far as flukes, is to harvest from above the water level. Number one is to harvest from pure sources that are not hit by agriculture. But then if you are harvesting from agriculture, to harvest from above the water, not below the water. The flukes can't live on without water. And then you can always cook it. You can steam it to kill the flukes if that's a potential concern. I eat large quantities of it. You can also dehydrate it and turn it into a powder. and no flukes can live through that. And then you can add that as a spoonful. But the fluke thing is pretty uncommon. It is something to know about, but yeah, it's nice to know that. But that said, there's plenty of people who don't know, that don't have flukes, so it's not the most common thing.
That is good to know. I do a fluke does creep me out. But with that knowledge of how to get it, that really does help.
Yeah. And then to finish the last question, of course, is if you happen to be in a wetland of wild rice. Now that's most wetlands don't have wild rice, but many do. And if you happen to be on land with wild rice, then you have basically the temple is in your backyard. What is my church basically is amongst the wild rice. So wow, if you happen to have that in your wetland, then I encourage you to become a great steward of it. So there's many other plants, and definitely Sam Thayer's books will teach you very extensively on what plants you can get from the wetlands.
Yeah. So the next question we'll have Walker, I think, is next in the queue to ask a question verbally.
I think Serena beat me to that, or did
She
you
already-
get your question in?
She already, unless she won. Yeah.
I just had one quick one. Are you aware of psilocybe species growing in like landscape in your part of California? Because I mean, that's just a gold mine out there people have access to.
Yes. So I am aware of psilocybes growing in mulch that is brought into a lot of the cities, and where you're just really you're walking down the street and the golden teacher.
There they are. Yeah.
I haven't experienced that because I'm new to having a relationship with any psilocybes, and also I'm just a guest of this region. The psilocybes that I had the most potential to be connected to was in Florida, of a fair quantity of I don't remember which species it is.
Cubensis, I think it would be.
Cubensis grows in the cow patties, and but I have friends who harvest I know some people who make their entire living off of selling the psilocybes from cow patties in Florida. It's abundant, but so no, I have not connected with them out here. This is some psilocybes, and I don't remember the species, but this is from Eric Joseph Lewis. Have any of you come across Eric Joseph Lewis on Instagram? He is one of my closest colleagues. We host foraging school together and some plant walks. And this is one that a friend of his foraged in the East Coast. So I don't know what species. I have to have him remind me of what species it is. But yes.
Sure. And another thing, do we think there's any kind of sustainable way to harvest chaga? As far as I understand, like they can parasitize a birch tree for 10 years or decades. And I don't know what they're using those sterile conchs for, but when people go and harvest those, I don't know if it's all that sustainable because of their long lifespan with birch. So something to think about.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. My belief is that certainly in the right quantity, chaga can be worked with as a medicine by humans in a way that is in alignment with the trees and the earth. Now, how are we doing that as a humanity today? Overall, unlikely.
That's what concerns me with its popularity.
I do have just briefly a couple recommendations that WMS makes in our like foraging kind of like classes or on walks and things. And I'd say the three big ones is number one, keep in mind your processing, and that use that to kind of limit how much you're taking. Don't take to let it mold, or follow through, and that'll kind of naturally limit you. And if we can all do that, that certainly helps. And then thing number two is don't harvest at sawing. Particularly don't saw into the tree to saw it off. So you're harvesting, as you say, like the sterile conch, otherwise known as the sclerotia, which I think what I've been told is that it's being used as like a energy cell or a storage of food by the mycelium of the mushroom, and then it can draw from that to fruit and do other things. That's what I've been told. I don't know that like for certain from research or anything, but
Yeah,
so
thank you for sharing that.
and then the third thing was if you're not sawing, you use like a hammer, like a rock hammer or any hammer to tap off in real chaga. So this will be another way for you to tell that it's really chaga. Will have those fracture lines, cracks, and it'll come off in little chunks. And then maybe don't take the whole thing, only crack off a little bit from each thing that you're harvesting. And anecdotal evidence that I've heard suggests that compared to like a saw straight down on the chaga that leaves this unnatural cut, you take it on its own fracture lines and it comes back much more quickly. Like that individual sclerotia will build back out.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it is super true that it's even for the health of the birch tree too that we don't like. You might be like that birch tree's doomed, but you shouldn't like cut down a living birch to try to get it, which I've heard of people doing.
And then, of course, you do have selective thinning. There are scenarios where cutting down a birch tree is actually beneficial to the forest, and you could harvest your chaga, and maybe you would get multiple years' supply of chaga through actual sustainable selective thinning. So there's always, there's situationals. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And my actual answer is that I don't know, of course. But I would strongly believe that if we can tie into the way humans have worked with it for, pre-colonization and for hundreds of years or potentially thousands of years, that there's proof and evidence that we can. It's just a matter of how we do it, and quantities are very important, of course. And that's why I don't try to get involved in mushroom industry. I keep all of my hands in the hands of the people close to me. Because once you get into mushroom industry where you're buying things in, packages like this, which I'm not against it. I do try to avoid it because I can't be certain of the sourcing of it. But yeah. So those are some thoughts on that.
Thanks.
The next person in the queue to ask a out loud question is Noah and Andrew.
Noah and Andrew. And are you in a greenhouse, Noah and Andrew?
No.
Andrew?
We're at a library. We're outside a library right now from Washington. I'm originally from Wisconsin.
I'm from Washington.
His first question was if you've foraged in the Pacific Northwest / Washington area, and then I have a different question after.
Okay. If I have foraged in the Pacific Northwest, Washington area, if there was one food that you think I've foraged there, what do you think it would be?
I mean, there's blackberries everywhere, but
blackberries. The blackberries in that region are just incredible, right?
We're surrounded in them right now.
When is the earliest harvest of them?
Early summer, probably like July. You can start getting them, but they go all the way through August. It depends on how much rainfall we get.
I'll be there.
All right, perfect.
And I genuinely will. I'll answer your question, but I may as well mention this before I forget. I haven't released this like publicly yet, but I am sharing with a few people that I am going to walk from the border of Canada and Washington to Los Angeles along the Pacific Coast Highway this summer.
Oh, there you go.
Leaving about mid-July from Washington, and anybody who would like to is welcome to join for a day, a week, multiple months. And it basically may just end up being the longest plant walk in modern times. Like it may just end up being a 2,000-mile plant walk that we embark on. So you're welcome to join for days, weeks, and months. And I'm actually looking for people that would like to become core organizers in it. And someone that would like to potentially be a support vehicle. And the idea would be that we would be eating 100% locally sourced foods, lots of it being foraged foods. And one person each day would move ahead to where we're staying, and they'd have a meal ready so that when we all arrive from walking, we would have a local nourishing meal. We'd have compost toilets on a support bicycle, so that we wouldn't have to use flush toilets all the way 1,800 miles down the coast, or even pee. And we would be pretty self-sustaining and very connected to the community. We would be of service to the communities we pass through, largely through relationships with the plants. So if that sounds exciting to any of you, keep that in mind. And I'm not going to publish anything about it for I might never publish anything. It might be just that you have to show up, and if you come, you come. But I might announce it prior. We'll see. I'm not sure how it's going to happen, but I'm 90% sure I'm going to do the walk right now. And I invite you to all come and join. And the Washington and Oregon portions and Northern California are going to be bliss, baby.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
be sure to
awesome.
check out the native reservations around here. They do foraging and have all sorts of smoked salmon in this area. And it's all along that coastal highway.
So I have a question. I run a personal newsletter and podcast, and I was curious if you would be open to coming on the podcast and talking about your lifestyle for a little bit and recommendations for people who would like to live more wholesome and holistic lives, and just talk about that for about an hour or so.
So here's my proposition to do that. If you come and find me and you bring the recorder, we'll sit down for an hour and we'll record the podcast. But you got to come and find me to make it happen.
You don't like it online?
I may. It just
He
that's
wants
the
to
way-
play
that's the
World
way-
War.
That's the
We'll see
way
in
it's going to happen. Online, I'm actually this year potentially going to get rid of my computer and not be online for a few years. And right now I am minimizing my online time. And it's my number one source of like not being connected to the outside world. So I just am not able to say yes to every opportunity that I would love to, but I can say yes if you show up and you put the recorder right there and we have a heart-to-heart conversation in person. That I can guarantee.
Okay, as far as reaching out to make that happen, do you have any contact information you could share, if not publicly, privately somehow?
You can just go to my website and click the contact form.
Okay.
And then the email is info@robingreenfield.org, and they go to the same place. Sometimes that's me receiving it, and sometimes it's a volunteer receiving it, depending on what's going on.
Okay, and your website was in the info material out with the email as well, right?
Yeah, it's just my name, robingreenfield.org.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I would love to make this happen.
That's really nice that you guys are connecting like that. We have a couple more questions. I think the next one I saw was, can you talk about using the deer killed on roads, and how did you hear about like where they are, and like how to go find them essentially, and what are the rules of that, and how do you dispose of unused bits?
And that
you're doing
basically everything, the entire everything about working with a deer that's been hit by a car. I'm happy to dive into that and give a short few minutes. I'm just gonna, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna give about 3 minutes to this, and I'm going to share as much information as I possibly can in about 3 minutes on this topic. So basically, a deer that's been hit by a car is simply that, a deer that's been hit by a car. If you shoot it with a gun or you hit it with a car, it's still a deer. So the process is more or less the same as if you were to go hunting. The key is just learning how long it's been sitting there and being able to tell some basic signs. Just like you hopefully have some ability to tell if food is starting to spoil at home, you start to connect with these abilities to tell whether this food is spoiling in the wild as well. You use your scent, your senses. The first most safe sense is looking at it, then smelling, then touching, and tasting is one of the later senses. And when you tap into these senses, it all becomes very common sense. I learned about it just by hearing of other people doing it, and I was intimidated very much by the process because I had never, worked with large animals at all, as far as and I thought, okay, you need this cut and that cut. No, you just have to open it up and then cut the meat off of the bone, or take the whole bone, put it in a crock pot and cook it. You don't need any special cuts. You don't need to do anything special. This right here, this bicep, I wish I didn't have the shirt in the way, but you'd be amazed at all you have to do, and this bicep will just come right off. It's barely connected. So harvesting meat from animals, generally the easiest things to do are the back strap, which is the two muscles right along the vertebrates, and then the 4 quarters, the front shoulders and the back shoulders. And then the other one would be the neck roast. Those are the ones that I work with the most as far as harvesting deer, because I usually do it by the roadside. I usually drag it off. Ideally, it's hit in a place where there's, trees, and I can just drag it into the woods there. But sometimes I'll take the whole deer home. But I've harvested deer that have been in my car on my bicycle, put 40 pounds of meat on my bicycle and biked home with it. And so basically what I do is I set them up on their 4 elbows. I don't hang them. I just set them up on their 4 elbows, and then I just cut down the back, pull out the back straps. So that's what you can do if you're just driving down the road. Just carry a knife, a bottle of soapy, I like Dr. Bronner's, a biodegradable water, and some hand cloths. And then you carry sheets, cotton sheets, because you don't wrap the meat in plastic. You want the meat to be able to breathe. That's how you actually tenderize the meat and process it a little bit, is by wrapping it in cotton sheets. And then you don't need to get it in the fridge right away. It can be out for multiple days depending on the temperature to cure it a little bit. And so yeah, last couple notes. I do have a video on my YouTube channel that is, I think it's called like Why I Eat Deers That Have Been Hit by Cars. I think if you go to robingreenfield.org/deer, DEER, that's the information that I have online about it, and I don't remember how much information I've actually put there. Also, my food freedom book is coming out hopefully within the next 2 months, and that is going to have a substantial section on how to work with deer. Not because I really want to, because in society, to be the guy who eats deer that are hit by cars, it's kind of like not. It doesn't really mesh with the mainstream society, but
Nah, anyone I would think is cool would be down with some roadkill deer, right?
for sure. But we are a niche in that regard. But I'm trying to expand that niche and be my honest, true, vulnerable self. So there will be a chapter, or not a chapter, but a couple pages that teaches the process as well. So those are a few thoughts. There's so much more that I could say on it, but it is safe. That is the last thing I'll say is what deer you're going for is deer that are generally less than 24 hours old on the side of the road. But if it's winter and it's freezing, it could be a month. In the summer when it's like 70s in August, then you're looking at, depending on how it was hit, I've harvested them about 24 hours old. And you generally avoid the stomach area. If it's been ruptured, that's where the back straps and the 4 quarters are easiest to work with.
Normally in Wisconsin, when someone's leaving, you would say, watch out for deer as a goodbye. But I think if you're leaving in your car, deer need to watch out for you.
Which is, they do. And that's the way you will get a deer, is you let all of your friends know that if they see a deer to call you. By doing that, you have hundreds of miles of eyes on the road. That's how I get my deer. I spread the word. And some counties even have a system where you call into the police, and then the police will have and they'll call the next person on the list, and the next person until someone says they'll go get it. So there are actually some systems in place, some structural systems. Sometimes that's through the sheriff, but you can also, it's legal. In Wisconsin, all you have to do is call the DNR, and they'll give you a tag number right over the phone. So if you have a cell phone, you call them, you say there's this deer on the side of the road, they'll give you a tag number, and then it's 100% legal. You're not legally allowed to harvest, I think, does, and I think the reason why is it prevents people from fawns from intentionally hitting them. But I've never called in my permit, and because I don't have a cell phone, and also because I just don't want to. I pick up the deer, and I have my relationship with the deer, and I don't need to involve anyone else in that moment. So Wisconsin is an excellent place. I believe 20,000 deer are hit by cars per year in the state of Wisconsin. So if you're looking for some serious food, then harvesting deer is a serious way to do it. And if you're in an area that doesn't have deer that are hit by cars, then it's worth a weekend, foraging outing because there's few scores that are more solid than getting 4 quarters and 2 back straps. And if you get deer right, you can even harvest the organs if you get them at the right time and they're hitting the right way. I've never done that from a no, I did. The last deer was the first time that nope, never mind. Those organs were from a deer from someone else. Never mind, not from a deer that was hit. So I've never harvested the organs, but lots of bone broth as well. So yes, we went longer than 3 minutes on deer, but it is a topic that
It's a Wisconsin chat over here. The last
we do have one more question.
Max.
Did I ask a question?
Oh sure, after Max, I think directly.
Yep. After.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm just coming from a like an arts or fine arts background, and what you've done is you made me think a little bit about some of the durational performance artists. I think most notably is Marina Abramovich. I'm not sure how tapped into this type of thing that you are, but you really reminded me of in almost kind of an opposite way of an artist, a Taiwanese artist named, I might have a difficulty pronouncing it, Dershing Shea, who would do things like punch a clock in his apartment every single day for an entire year and stay in that apartment every single day for 1 year.
Yes.
And which seems like in an interesting way, like the exact opposite, but very similar in this sort of confusing way. And I was just curious to ask if you were familiar with any of these type of sort of performative or durational artists, and if you had any thoughts about that.
Yes, thank you for asking that, Max. That's a interesting direction to go. And I am familiar with the Taiwanese artist that you speak of, and every time I've seen him come out into the world through his art, I have enjoyed it thoroughly. And I'm not familiar with the first person that you mentioned. I may be familiar with them. Often people who do these things are not remembered by their names, but their actions. So it's possible that I've come across their actions. And I am I don't consider myself an artist, but I consider myself a performer for sure. And I am very clearly an artist because everything is art. Art is within the mind. So it is completely within the realm to call me a performance artist. I've designed my entire life to be a message that creates critical thought and self-reflection and self-observation within people, both the mainstream society that are in a state of delusion and people who have stepped outside of that delusion but are looking to step further. So my entire design, and I would like to say my entire, but I'm still distracted some. Like I watch The Office on YouTube, and I eat ice cream that I don't need to be eating, and so there's ways in which I can't say my entire life, but my objective is for my entire life to be my message and I mean to the entirety, to every element. And Gandhi was the greatest performance artist that I know. That's what he did. He was a performing artist. He performed his life, what he called his experiments with truth, as a show, as a performance, as a demonstration to humanity that reached millions and millions, billions of people and transformed lives for many people. And that is the objective in which I am taking my life and going further as well. So I'm glad that you see that, and I think maybe you'll see that even more in the years ahead potentially.
Yeah, it seems like
I'm just sorry, Max. You can go ahead and make your comment.
No, it's okay. That was
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say that as a club, that is like something that we sort of try to really foster as well, is like a connectivity between both ourselves as members and as a community of people, and also between the members and, you know, the natural world that we go into and learn more about and, you know, sort of form a deeper connection with. So, and and there is even for us as a club, I think there is sometimes a small amount of like performance art in what we do, you know, like teaching people about mushrooms. So I can relate to your question and to what Robin's answer was to it. Like I think that it's really all very connected.
I'm a strong proponent of, at the end of a foray, like making a little ceremony of putting the mushrooms back that we're not taking. In part because it helps them stay out of the trash by accident, and also just because it's kind of fun to frisbee them into the woods.
Nice.
So I do want to make sure we get to Sandy. Also, hello, Sandy.
Hi.
Hi, Sandy.
Hi, Robin. I remember hearing you in this talk about dehydrating and pressure cooking some of your foods. How do you do that along your way? You know, you talked about roadkill deer. Are you taking this meat and pressure cooking it? And then do you know, how do you like ration your food and pressure cook it? Tell me a little bit about that if you would.
Sure. I also want to say thank you all for all of you that are still here 28 minutes after the hour. And I'm grateful to be here with the 44 of you in this moment, because this is to share with all of you. I love your energy. So as far as the question of, so with deer, generally my primary way of processing them is pressure canning. But with that said, I'll be back in 10 seconds. Okay, I don't know if that was more than 10 seconds, but here is some venison jerky. And this is from the deer that I harvested in Wisconsin. And so I'm just getting into venison jerky this year, really, because I primarily pressure can it. Pretty good. I primarily pressure can it because I primarily eat a lot of venison when I'm in one place. So pressure canning just really works because I'm storing jars. So when I'm in Wisconsin or North Carolina or Florida, that's my primary thing. Or if I'm staying in a place with a freezer, I'll also freeze it. A deep chest freezer is one of the most, one of the most helpful tools, technologies for if you want to break free from the grocery store. So I do freeze a lot of meat, and then I pressure can it as my number one, and then dehydrating. And pressure canning I like because it gives it's like the deer right out of the crock pot. And wherever you are, you if you're traveling to a conference, or if you're doing a road trip across the country, or if you just get home late and you're tired, you can just pop open a can of deer and have fresh, well, not fresh, but like it's delicious venison right out of the can. And if you put in the onions and the garlic and herbs and spices right into that, I like to eat that right out of the can. It's an incredible, you can bring it backpacking, canoeing, biking. Like I love eating it while I'm out wild ricing right out of the can. I love wild rice and deer together. And I'm just getting into this. And I will say the challenge that I've had is that even though I dried it very, very thoroughly, it still has gotten some mold on it. And it's a green.
Do you use curing salt, or do you just cure or dehydrate?
You don't need salt. Ideally, I would have used salt, but I was just very busy and I was stressed out. I was doing it in the basement of my friend's place, and my friend's wife really didn't like strong smells, and I had just all these fish broths I was making, and I was stressed out trying to get some of these things done. But this is a green mold, but interestingly, I learned from Natalie Bogwalker, who's one of the people where, like, if I have a question about something, she's the most likely person to know the answer. She's based in Asheville, North Carolina area in the Appalachian Mountains. She started a school called Wild Abundance, and there's no risk with green mold on you just wipe it off. Now, you know, I would be open to hearing other people's not right now, we don't need to go into it, but I'd be open to hearing people who have educated opinions that say otherwise, not just based on fear and such, but like who know what they're talking about. I'd love to hear. But so yeah, that's just I'm sharing that because it gives the question a deeper answer as to, like, yeah, I'm also just figuring some of these things out. But last thing I'll say is with this deer, what I like to do is I don't actually generally eat it as jerky. What I do is cook it. So I'll make a pot of stew and then I put the dried meat in there, which is, you know, like Lakota people, dried meat is one of their absolute staples. And that way they can have dried meat. It's easy out there on the plains, you know, dehydrating on the plains is it's a good spot for dehydrating. But then they will add that to meats. Linda Black Elk is one of my heroes, and at the 2 Midwest Wild Harvest festivals ago, her husband Luke made a stew with dehydrated meats, and it won the cooking contest. And so you can make some pretty solid stuff with it. Highlands Biological Station. Why are you putting that out there, Walker?
I was just showing Amalia. I didn't know she'd be joining the meeting, and that's where we had met. It was a week-long mushroom identification course.
Nice. So is this the end, or do we have one last question, or are we done now?
We do
There
have
was one last question, yes. And we're gonna cut it off after that because we do want to be respectful of your time.
Well,
but there's
you can't-
one from
only one
Lindsay.
person can be respectful of my time, and that's me. I am a liberated
Okay.
human that makes my own decisions. I'm here because I want to be, not for any other reason but that.
Okay, well, good. Well, we're very, very happy to have you. The last question is, have you started your school lunch exploration?
I'm glad you asked that. Literally, yes, in the sense of that there's been an exploration, but no in the sense of embarking on the 30 days of eating only school lunch. And the reason it's no is because, well, I embarked on this just so certain that we would find a school that was happy for me to eat their lunch for 30 days. That I brought on a team, I got the funding, we moved forward with a whole lot of things, but we never got the school to partner with us. And with that said, that was based on Los Angeles. And I chose Los Angeles because it's a media campaign and I wanted to be doing talk shows ideally and such. I think a lot of schools across the nation would be totally happy to do it, especially in more rural areas. But so it's postponed. That's why I'm in Santa Cruz. I'm now going to hunker down and finish my book, and hopefully do school lunch in the next school year or the school year after. So if you're involved with a school in Wisconsin that would like me to come and eat 30 days of school lunch, I'm not going to be at the school every day. Maybe this is a reason why I end up coming back to and doing it in Wisconsin, which would be very interesting. So feel free to put the message out there, and the website's robingreenfield.org/school lunch, and you can share that as a possibility, and maybe that'll bring me back.
Cool. Well, I tell you what, if you don't come back for that, if you ever want to, attend any of our events or be a speaker at any events over the summer or anything like that, you definitely would fit in very well, especially like at Tri-County where Linda Black Elk and Sam Thayer are already going to be around. You can come have fun with us if you feel like it. So let us know if you're interested. But it was such a pleasure to have you here today. And I think all of us would join in saying thank you so much for giving us your time and being part of our community. It was so great.
And Annette, to your question, If you still want to ask it here, you can. Otherwise, I did give you my phone number just in case you want to call and talk about poisonous fungi in Wisconsin.
Nice. Yeah, there's plenty of other people who can answer that question real well.
But she also did say in the chat, just in case you didn't see it, yes, Milwaukee Public Schools garden program.
Yes, there's some good stuff going on in Milwaukee. I'm excited to see what's going on there. So, yeah, thank you for having me and spending this time together. It's exactly where I wanted to be in this time, and I'm glad to have been here 38 minutes later with all of you. And I hope to share not real life moments. This is real life, but I hope to share in-person moments with you in the future. And I really hope that mushrooms are involved in one way, shape, or form. So yeah, I love you all very much, and
thanks for being so thorough.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And just for everyone else, as far as the normal announcements that we make or whatever, our website is down right now for those of you who might not have seen it, but we have it listed on Facebook as far as like an alternate route, and we also sent out an email like a week ago, or maybe a little less than that, with our alternate website. So if anyone's trying to get onto the website, you can get on that way. We also do have that change.org campaign going on right now to make Wisconsin have a state mushroom, which is going to be hen of the woods. So for all of our members, if you want to help us support that little initiative that we're doing,
Hen of the woods.
get online. What? Walker,
I
what?
forget. What was Tavis's? I'm sorry. What was Tavis's pick?
Tavis
can't
wanted
remember this.
Tavis wanted rotula.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I like that idea too.
Yeah, his was cute, but we did our little poll, and the masses have spoken, and we're gonna respect that. So
all right, democracy.
yes, I know. I mean, I could try to be an evil dictator if I wanted to, but I I think I'd rather just go with the consensus or whatever. So yeah, and then our events that are coming up, both our retreats and our one-day forays, are listed on our events page on our website. So everyone check that out. And if anyone else has any questions for Mariah or me about the club, feel free to ask before we sign off. But that's about it for today.
Nope. I was just gonna say I'll see y'all at North Kettle Moraine.
Cool. Good. We'll be there.
Sweet.
Yep.
And well, thanks for organizing this, y'all.
Thanks for being here, and everyone. Great to see you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Night.